Many British people read these murders as proof that Turks were, in the favourite British newspaper cliché about Turks, that Turks were hot-headed. Now, of course one could say that taking two murderers to represent a country of 70 million people was a little bit of a simplification. Your former international player Tayfun Korkut, who I interviewed in Istanbul, I want to say more about that interview because to me it was very interesting. Tayfun told me, "I don't think the murder should create problems between two countries. It was just crazy people hitting each other." Obviously that's true, but problems between the two countries were nonetheless created.
SimonKUPER. Futbolcu Tayfun Korkut, Tayfun Bey diye bahsettiği futbolcu, Fenerbahçe futbolcu Tayfun Korkut. Onunla bir konuşma yapmış. Yes.
So I was here in Istanbul for that Turkey-England match in 2003. And arriving here again, I had to laugh about all the talk about Midnight Express that was just going on in British newspapers. Because as always, my experience as a Briton in Istanbul was of great Turkish friendliness. Now, of course, I would say this, speaking to an audience of Turks, but it also happens to be true. I've never really had any bad experiences in Istanbul. I landed carrying a British passport. I was waved straight through all the controls at the airport. Nobody said, "Are you planning to watch the Turkey-England football match?" because Britons aren't allowed to go there. No, I was just waved into the country. I walked around Istanbul. Nobody hit me. I had coffee and cognac on the terrace overlooking the Bosphorus. I was taken there by Turkish friends, who I barely knew actually, but they refused to let me pay for a thing. I walked around in the sun, went around the big historical monuments in Istanbul. Everywhere there were British people speaking in British accents, not being stabbed by Turks. In short, as you know, Istanbul is not hell for Britain, but that is what you would believe if you read British newspapers. Having said something about British attitudes to Turkey now, I'd like to talk about what I understand to be general Turkish attitudes to Britain. Now this is very dangerous ground for me because you know much more about this than I do. So I'm going to try to tread very carefully, and I would be grateful if I make mistakes to be corrected. I just want to say what I've observed as a frequent British visitor here who's taken an interest in the subject of relations between our countries and has interviewed people about it. Now, a few years ago, I interviewed the great historian Norman Stone, who is a Brit who works here. And when I was a student at Oxford, I used to go to Norman Stone's fantastic lectures where he'd speak without notes for an hour. He wouldn't stumble, speak in perfect sentences, and he'd grip the lectern all the time like this. I don't know why, perhaps trying to cope with inner demons. Fluently for a full hour. Now speaking from notes, I can only admire that feat. I know how difficult it is. Stone was a brilliant lecturer. He used to lecture quite early in the mornings, at a time when hardly any students would get out of bed, but people got out of bed to listen to him. Now he teaches at Bilkent University in Ankara, and he has been here more than a decade now, and he told me his impression was that Turks have long been in awe of the British, that there's a sort of Turkish respect for Britain. And Stone said, I quote, "They are scared of us," i.e. the Turks are scared of the British. Not my view, what he said. Britain has been such a fabulous success story as a country. The Industrial Revolution, winning wars, the construction of the nation states, the invention of football and rock music, and everything else. So that's his take. But then what happened was we got British football fans behaving badly, and British journalists also behaving badly, writing nonsense about Turkey. And that has created a slightly different image of Britons among Turks, but also because the hooligan is a worldwide symbol, it created a different image of Britain all over the world. So in 1993, when Manchester United were here, I keep referring to that visit because it was very important in forming impressions. Photospor newspaper wrote a message to its English friends in English, and it said to its English friends, "Sort yourself out. And to think for years we believed you were true English gentlemen. God, we were wrong." Now, why are Turks and Britons so divided about the conflicts between our football fans? Why is your interpretation so utterly different from the interpretation of the British media? And I think it's because Britons and Turks mean different things when we say the word hooligan. When Britons say hooligan, they mean fans who fight. Fans who have physical fights with the police or with other fans. But when the Turks and many Europeans, the French, the Germans talk about hooligans, they also actually mean supporters who may not fight, but supporters who break all the social rules of the country they are in. And that's what British fans very often do. So for Turks, the drunken Leeds fans hanging around Taksim Square in 2000 were hooligans. Now, okay, they perhaps didn't fight with anybody, but they did show their backsides to passers-by, they shouted abuse at women, and they urinated on the Turkish flag. So to the English themselves, they were not hooligans, they were just lads having fun. To the Turks, they were probably perceived as hooligans. And because of English fans like this, the Turkish image of the Englishman appears to be changing. Perhaps to many Turks now, an Englishman means a drunken football supporter first of all. Just as to many British journalists, a Turk means a murderer with a knife on the back streets. I asked Norman Stone, the historian, about Eriksson's warning to England fans not to come to the match. And Stone laughed and laughed, and he said, "Yes, I saw that idiotic Swede saying, 'Don't turn up.' Welcome to hell, it's a wonderful place. I've been here nearly 10 years now and haven't had a nanosecond of regret. The food's very good, the history's interesting, the people are extremely polite. What happens is that when confronted with a certain type of English, they don't know what to do. Our lot, in other words the English, should simply be kept out of Turkey. It's embarrassing for us when my students just get embarrassed by comments in our press that it's all somehow the Turks' fault." And Stone talked more about British stereotypes in Turkey, and he said, "Midnight Express appears every year on British TV, doesn't it? The Turks are dreadful at public relations, dreadful." Let me just tell you about my experience of going to that Turkey-England game over the river at the Fenerbahçe Stadium. So I took the boat across from here, talking English all the time with a Turkish friend. We were among hundreds of Turkish fans on the boat. Nobody bothered me, nobody said, "Oh, you are here to support England." That's not actually even allowed on this, for this particular match. I walked towards the stadium, speaking English all the time with this Turkish friend. Again, security people were extremely friendly. I was searched various times, and then they ushered me into the stand. I spoke English at the stand all the time. So after all this hysteria in the British press, my empirical experience was rather different. It was remarkable because it was the first time I'd ever been to an England match where, looking around this packed stadium, you couldn't see a single England flag or even anyone wearing an England shirt. In the press stand, I met this man behind me, who was now a Turkish journalist, but who had been Turkey's goalkeeper in a game 20 years ago at Wembley, when, as you may recall, you lost 8-0 to England. And this man, Fatih Iranz, was extremely happy to meet an Englishman. And when I apologized to him for the 8 goals, he said, in English, he said, "No, it was a nice memory for me, because I showed my effort, but capacity was restricted. All my career, I wanted to play in Wembley. If I got another chance to play there, even if I conceded 15 goals, no problem." So here was a man who felt he had been part of football history. Okay, he'd been on the wrong side of football history, but that didn't really bother him. And I thought it was an extremely noble attitude to have, because of course, in the end of football, most of us are losers. Most of us lose the Champions League, most of us are going to lose to Euro 2008. So it's often better to embrace being a loser and just to say, well, I was there, I saw the winners. That Turkey-England game in 2003, by the way, was extremely boring. And it ended 0-0 because David Beckham hit a penalty about 20 metres over the crossbar. It may have been the worst penalty I've ever seen. And in fact, the most interesting thing that evening happened off the field. What seems to have happened is that Beckham and your player Alpay had a bit of a fight in the tunnel at half-time. And the referee, Pierluigi Collina, called them into his room at half-time and told them to be good boys, or else he was going to send them off immediately.